So tonight we are going to play for you some of our favorite clips over the past 5 years. We sure have come quite a long way. I remember when I started the show back in 2019. And first of all, we started before taking stock with Money Mondays. Who remembers Money Mondays, JA? That was a short feature on like Instagram every Monday talking about money. And very quickly, I realized that there was a demand for more information. A lot was happening on the stock market at the time. 2019 was a pretty good year for the Jamaica Stock Exchange, coming off the heels of 2018, when Jamaica was the top performing stock market in the entire world. So there was a lot of pent-up interest in the Jamaica Stock Exchange. That need was not being filled by the existing shows, the existing content, the existing news. And so I said, you know what we need to do? We need a show that is going to focus on Jamaican stock market news. I want to have analysts from all the major investment firms on the show to give us their unbiased opinions about what is happening in the market. Why is a stock up? Why is a stock down? And not just the analysts who are trying to, or the firms who are trying to sell us a particular IPO or a particular offer, but I want their competitors to be a part of it as well, so that we get different viewpoints. And I also want to have independent analysts on to be able to tell us what is going on. I want to be able to interview the leaders of these Jamaican businesses, particularly the listed companies, to hold them accountable for what is going on in their companies and to learn more about the strategic positions that they are taking. And thus the idea for Taking Stock was born. Wasn't able to get it on television, which was the original idea, but we came straight to YouTube, which at the time was revolutionary for Jamaica. I'll put that out there. I'll say that. We had not had a major show of this kind come straight to YouTube in Jamaica. And as a matter of fact, everybody I consulted with said that this would never work, that advertisers would never go for it, sponsors would not sponsor a YouTube show. And when Taking Stock premiered on October 28, 2019, we premiered with 4 corporate sponsors. And I thought that was an amazing achievement. We had JMMB, who's been there from day one and has stuck with us for the past 5 years. They are still with us. We had Bulwark Insurance Agents, now agency, and they were with us for about 4 years. We had NCB and we had Sagicor. So we launched with 4 major sponsors, major corporate sponsors, which was unheard of at the time. So this show has indeed been revolutionary, and it is my honor to say that we have been here for the past 5 years. I want to know what your favorite moment has been in Taking Stock history. Let us know in the comments. What do you remember? What has been your biggest takeaway? What has been the biggest impact of the show since 2019? Tonight, we're going to look back at some of the clips. Let me see what the first one is. I know what my biggest show was, the biggest impact. I talk about it all the time when we, discuss, when I give speeches about, how the show came about, the history of it and all of that. But I will tell you a little bit later on what that was. So, like I said, we're looking back at some of our best episodes. And of course, we had to start with our very first episode. Here's a look back at episode 1, Taking Stock. Welcome back to Taking Stock. Now, QWI Investments' initial public offer opens on Monday, September 16, and it's already causing a lot of excitement on the market, triggering the JSE's circuit breaker twice in one day for parent company Jamaican Teas. So here's a quick look at the offer. They're selling 600 million ordinary shares, seeking to raise $787 million. Only 270 million shares are open to the public at a share price of $1.35 each. But if you're an existing shareholder of Jamaican Teas, you can apply in the reserved pool and get a discount at $1.25 each. And if demand is high enough, they could add another 300 million shares. The minimum investment, 10,000 shares. So you can get in on this for as little as $13,500 plus minimal fees. And the lead broker is NCB Capital Markets. Joining me now is the face of QWI. His financial blog, IC Insider, is the go-to for those who want to be in the know. He sits on many public and private boards. By trade, he's a chartered accountant. We also know him as an entrepreneur. Welcome, John Jackson.
Thanks to be here.
Good to have you. So tell us all about QWI. You're the new kid on the block in terms of investment firms. What do you do? What's your strategy?
Well, the strategy is to invest funds in stocks and shares primarily. That's the primary objective at this stage, to maximize the returns on investment. And so far we've done, I think, pretty well. We've done just over 50% after expenses since the end of March.
Just over 50% what?
Return on
investment.
The gain since March is 50%. So if we had invested $100,000, it's $150.
Since March, and that's only a few months ago.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. So what makes you different than any other investment firm out there?
Well, I think we're the only firm that will actively manage the investment in terms of equities to try and maximize the returns on it, return on investment. So there are some that are passive, some that are, because of the size of the portfolio, blocks in the portfolio, don't have the same flexibility that we may have. Mm-hmm. And we just look for opportunities where we see them, and we're constantly looking for opportunities. And we will get rid of stocks if we believe the stocks have actually reached a level that's not going to deliver the type of return we think is acceptable in the short to medium term.
And how often do you make those types of decisions?
We look at the market on a daily basis, 7 days a week. So we're constantly looking at opportunities while trading is taking place, when company results are released. And on weekends, we spend time looking at, look at which stocks are better value than others and where we may see opportunities that may not have existed. We probably didn't identify before.
By the way, who's we? Because a lot will depend on whether people trust you and your team to make these decisions and deliver the returns you believe you can deliver. So who's your investment team?
The team comprises myself. I'm the chairman of the investment committee. The director is David Stevens. He's another person. He's personally involved in investments, in the market, and he's a businessman. His own right. Cameron Burnett, who is a chartered accountant like myself. He sits on the investment committee. John Mafood, although he's not a member officially of the investment committee, John goes back years, and he worked for security brokers, etc. So, and he's an investor in his own right. Carl Carby is an investor in his own right with significant amount of investment. And Malcolm McDonald, who is a director, also has knowledge of the investment market. So, but clearly, when you look at the portfolio, the performance of the stocks we have had before QE took it over, you see a level of consistency by and large that's there. So one don't have to look at the 50.5% just now, but look at the fact that we have delivered. We have also, most of us, a number of us, have been directors of Jamaican Teas. And when I joined Jamaican Teas as a director, the shares went in the market at $2.95. We have had 2 splits so far, and we are now, well, today's closing price is something like $7. It went up to $8 something.
So that was our interview with John Jackson from QWI. That IPO had just dropped or was just about to drop. And I remember that day so well, being our pilot episode for Taking Stock. And, the amount of you who tuned in and watched the show and supported us. We even had a launch party at Janga's, and you guys showed up. That was pretty amazing. Fun fact, I was about 5 months pregnant in that clip. It's October, November, December, January, February. Yeah, about 5 months pregnant in that clip. So my favorite memory of Taking Stock is actually, we don't have the clip, but I will describe it to you. And those of you who've been with us from day one, back when we were recording in person, That was at PBCJ, and then later on we moved to iCreate. My favorite clip was actually from February 2020. And that was the episode that we interviewed Nigel Clark about the TransJamaican Highway IPO. And one of the reasons that was my, I don't even know if favorite is the right word, but it's a standout episode to me for several reasons. One, I did that interview on Friday because at the time we were pre-recording the show and the show would come out on a Monday. We record on Friday, edit over the weekend, and we publish on YouTube on Mondays. So I did that interview with Nigel Clark on Friday, February 7. My son Ryan was born on Sunday, February 9, 2 days later. And then the following day, February 10, the show came out on schedule as planned. And we were able to get that out despite me literally giving birth over the weekend. And I remember looking at my big 9 months belly and telling Ryan, just stay in a couple more days. Let me do this interview and then you can make your arrival. And my son is a good boy. And so he listened. But the reason that interview was so important as well was TJH. To this day, it is still one of the top business news stories, one of the top stocks to follow. But at the time, it was such a huge deal because the government was selling this national asset to the public via an IPO. They had done it before with Wigton, but TJH was just on another level, on a whole nother scale. And the interest from the Jamaican public was overwhelming in this particular IPO. And it's something that I felt I had an obligation to cover for the people of Jamaica and for those who are interested in this particular opportunity. So that's the second reason that it stood out. One, because I did it 9 months pregnant and gave birth 2 days later. Two, because of the impact and the scale of TJH. And then three, because we all know what happened just a few days later. The COVID-19 pandemic hit, and then everything changed. And all of these people who had just invested in their very first IPO, their very first stock, TJH, TransJamaican Highway, had lost a lot of money because they saw the value of their stock plummet over the course of just a few days. We saw the Jamaica Stock Exchange lose 30% of its value in just a few days, which caused a lot of people to panic. In addition to that, you had a lot of people who lost their jobs. So they just lost all this money on the stock market, whether realized or unrealized. And then they lost their jobs. And now they don't know what on earth they should be doing with their lives. And so it was a very tumultuous time. And that is the interview that sticks out in my mind from the past 5 years for those reasons that I stated before. And I still want to know from you guys, what interview do you feel has had the most impact, or what has been the most memorable? So that was one. I think probably 3 interviews, but that was to me the most impactful. So let's take a look at another clip. This one, well, just roll the clip. Explain what happened on Friday, re-dividends.
So recall that one of our main objectives, apart from inflation targeted, is financial stability. We need to keep the system stable. And one aspect of that is liquidity in the system. Now, as you know, along with many other central banks in Europe, United States, elsewhere, Far East, we've been putting quite a bit of liquidity in the system. Indeed, we have put nearly 60 billion of liquidity in the system.
And that just means cash, that just means money.
Yes, it means cash. In other words, we have bought securities from the financial institutions. And what this has done is put them in a pretty strong place in terms of liquidity. So I need to state right from the beginning, there is no problem with the current liquidity situation of the financial institutions. But we don't know how long this lockdown will last. We don't know how deep it will be. We don't know how slow the recovery will be. So as a matter of prudence, we took a decision to ask the deposit-taking institutions, banks, as well as building societies, financial holding companies, to postpone the outflow of liquidity by way of dividend. So under the Banking Act, if we have cause, we can say, no, don't pay dividend. But because there is no cause in this instance, we had to ask. And I must say, every one of the financial institutions was very accommodating in that respect. One or two of them, it was a little bit more complicated because they had either already declared a dividend or had given notice that they were going to declare a dividend. So there was a little complexity there. But even in those instances, those institutions came out in support, and I really appreciate that. It's similar to how they decided not to, when they gave back the asset tax, they have stepped forward again and said, we want to work with the central bank to maintain stability.
If you already have a check in the mail and you just haven't cashed it yet or deposited it yet, does that mean it won't be honored?
No, that's okay. That means that the dividend would have been paid out already. So this is for listed enterprises, financial holding companies who have not yet actually drawn the check and sent it out.
Okay, explain who all this affects, because there's been some confusion out there. People have been afraid that it affected all listed companies, but it's only financial institutions. Tell me which ones it applies to.
Well, I hope I don't miss any of them, but all of the listed financial institutions. So BNS, NCB, Sagicor, JMMB, Victoria Mutual.
Okay, so we have all banks, insurance companies too, yes?
Well, any financial holding company. So Sagicor.
What a financial holding company is.
Right. So Sagicor Financial, Sagicor Group, and NCB Group, they would have banks in them, security dealers, insurance companies. So it's a listed enterprise that we call the financial holding company.
Mm-hmm. What about brokerage firms?
No, it doesn't apply to any brokerage firm.
Remittance companies?
No, so long as those are within the holding company, they can always dividend within the company, but we don't want them to dividend outside of it. So let us say, for example, Western Union as a part of Grace Remittance, they can move dividends within the organization, but we're asking them not to move those dividends out of the financial holding company. Mm-hmm. This is just a postponement. As we go along and as we hopefully see a little light at the end of the tunnel in the near future, we will relax that request.
You said postponement, but speak to how long this is expected to last, because the press release said for the rest of the 2020 financial year, which would be until March 2021.
Well, Kalila, I don't know how long this situation that we have with coronavirus will last. I don't know how deep it will be. There's been some talk recently internationally about what that recovery will look like. And more, I'm convinced that that recovery will be elongated. It won't be V-shaped. And so we have to just be prudent and make sure that we don't do anything early on that puts us in a compromising position later on. So we'll take it week by week and see what the situation is like.
Wow, so that interview with Richard Biles was, again, on a Friday. And the funny thing about that interview, we had already shot the show, because this was back in the time when we were pre-recording the show and then releasing it on a Monday. We had already done all of our interviews for the following week's show. And then the BOJ dropped this news that they were suspending dividends. This was early days, or probably middle of COVID. I don't remember what month, maybe sometime around the summer. The BOJ dropped this news that they were suspending dividends. And I had already shot my show for Monday. And I was like, hear what? Dash for the whole show. We need to reshoot because there's going to be a lot of uncertainty about what this policy means for investors, especially all of our new investors. And Richard Biles graciously agreed to come on the show at the last minute, and we redid the entire show from my living room. Because remember, after COVID, we had started out shooting in-person episodes. When COVID hit, we now had to figure out this new platform called Zoom that was so new to everybody. I ordered a webcam online, and I remember the webcam costing like 5 times what it would normally cost. It was like, I paid like $300 and something for a simple Logitech webcam that typically goes for like $70, $60. And the prices were insane at the time because they were just selling out like that. It's hot commodity. So I paid, $300 and something for this Logitech webcam, figured out how to use Zoom, and we switched to that platform, recording from my living room. So very interesting times. That was the interview with Richard Biles following that historic announcement that dividends would be suspended indefinitely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me take a few more of your comments before we head on over to the next clip. Natoya says, I remember oh too well, TJH was my first stock because it was promoted so well. I watched that interview as well. Your shows pushed me to stay on my investment journey. Forever grateful. Malik says, mine was the dollar IPO because it was my first IPO that I invested in. And B. Lee says, happy birthday. It is a milestone to celebrate. Roswell said, 2021 was a time I should have kept CPJ when trading low at 250. I missed out. And remember, I think it was the following year, CPJ was the #1 performing stock on the JSC. Orville said, should I name Ryan taking stock? You got jokes, Orville. Sean says, I honestly can't believe the show didn't make it on TV. The show taught me a lot in my early stages and gave me the confidence and the patience to keep investing. Thank you guys so much. Somebody was asking about the shirt. I posted the link in the chat to our merch store. This fresh drop. Literally, this is a sample, but the store is there and you guys can order your merchandise if you so please. Somebody said that they really liked it. So thank you very much. I'm glad that you do. Where is that comment? Can't find it, no. But anyway, moving right along, our next clip is from Mark Golding, because we think it is important to give viewers a balanced view of what is going on in the economy / Jamaican politics, because they go hand in hand. So we invited the opposition leader on, and he gave us his policy suggestions. Here's Marky G. What do you do differently from the current administration to improve the economy and to improve some of these issues that you mentioned just now? We can't talk about all of them just yet because you mentioned a lot: crime, education, healthcare. But specifically on the economy, what would you and your party do differently?
Well, I think it is important to continue the trajectory of reducing the public debt and achieving debt sustainability. It's written into our law, and it is something which we put a lot of sacrifice as a nation into getting to where we are. You know, when we entered into the IMF program in 2013, our debt to GDP ratio was 147%. And that was way out of whack. That had accumulated rapidly in the previous years and needed to be addressed for the long-term future of the country. As I've said, great strides have been made, bringing that down somewhere in the 80-odd% region now. And that is a very good thing. And we are committing to taking it to 60%, which is the statutory target that's built into the fiscal rules.
Go ahead.
But having said that, there is much more fiscal space now for policy options. So we are very interested in focusing on the problems of the primary school system and that major gap that I identified earlier as to, such a large percentage of our school children not getting the basics by the time they leave primary school. That has to be fixed. And that means more focus on the causes of the poor performance in primary schools, ensuring that teachers are well paid, that the teacher training system is adequate for the needs of the school system, and that the schools themselves are, especially the ones that are underperforming, are given the necessary attention to bring them up to scratch. That's a major plank for us. The training system in the country also, I think, is underperforming. For many years under the current administration, HAT, which is a state trading agency, didn't actually have a functional board. So students who went through HAT programs couldn't have their certificates signed, which meant that it was a very frustrating process for them. We need to look at our training system and I think have much more private sector input into that, because there are a number of companies in Jamaica that run excellent training programs internally. They call themselves, universities often, but they're training for the jobs that they have and that are coming downstream through the investments that they're making. And I think we need to really incentivize those companies that are capable of expanding their training to do so, and work in tandem with HAT and the state training apparatus, so that we're developing skills in our people that can service high value added investment and build our national productivity, which is the ultimate way that we can create greater wealth and grow our economy. So that's another area of focus for me. In terms of tertiary education,
build the national productivity, absolutely important. Yeah. But I think, Mr. Golding, probably issue number one on the economic front for Jamaicans right now is inflation, the cost of living. In the past year, things have gotten dramatically more expensive, and we don't know how to, a lot of people just don't know how to cope with the dramatic increase in the cost of living. So how do we address this?
Yeah, well, I had said from 2021, when it was clear that the bottom had fallen out of the economy because of COVID, that the government should do more to cushion the crisis on the people. And I had suggested that the direct expenditure for making life more tolerable, more bearable, more survivable for people who need that kind of help be increased to 2% of GDP, which at that time was roughly $40 billion per year. Keep up the excellent work of educating people about business and finance. I think that, I'm very impressed with what you've been able to deliver in this, developing this portal and this show on your own. I know a little bit about where you're coming from, and, keep up the good work. I think that what you have developed is a unique product, and people, I think, are benefiting from it and enjoying it. So God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for making the time to come. So that's Mark Golding, PNP leader here on Taking Stock. Oh, when was that? Like a year ago? Gosh, time flies so fast. Was it this year? I don't even remember. Time goes so quickly. It's hard to even keep track. So let me take a few more comments before we move on. Ricardo says, I remember voting for the name Taking Stock. Years later, bigger and better. Congratulations. Wow, Ricardo. Like when I say OG day one, you voted for the name Taking Stock. I don't even remember what the other options were, but it's good to know that you have been with us that long, from even before the show, even when the show was still just an idea. Garvin says, favorite episode was when you were putting pressure on the iCreate founder re their performance at the time while in the iCreate studio. I remember that episode indeed. Thanks, Garvin. Kamoy says that this show has done so much for us, Kalila. You've left an indelible mark on numerous lives. Thank you so much, Kamoy. The comment that I was looking for was from Glamour Wayne, who wanted to know how he could get one of these t-shirts to buy. They're really awesome. I'm glad you like it, Glamour Wayne. I have posted the link to our merch store in the chat, and we're going to put it later on. I think we have to wait until the show is over to edit the description, and then we'll put it in the description as well. You can also send it out by email. Sachel, I know you're on that. Let's get it out. Even though we haven't officially launched yet, but since you guys are asking, hey, why not put it out there? Sean says, breaking the circuit breaker twice in a day is wild. That was QWI, wasn't it? I don't even remember now. David says, can't remember, but I full joy. All of them. Glamour again says, to be honest, every episode is my favorite. So since we gave you the opposition leader, I have to say the interview with the Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, was definitely one of our most highly anticipated episodes. It remains, I think it's our top viewed episode. Was it this or Michael Leachin was our top viewed episode? But I know the Prime Minister's episode had over 18,000 views. It was definitely one of our top viewed episodes. And you guys had been waiting for it for a long time. We had been asking for it for quite some time as well. And he came through. And here's some highlights from that interview. So when we look at this entire situation that the country is facing, the cost of living, price of goods, rent is going up, school fees gone up like crazy, especially in the prep schools because of the increases in the public sector school, the teachers increase and so on. How do we cope? What do we do, the ones on the ground who still have to find the money for the school fee, who still have to find the money to feed our children, who still have to find the money to try buy a house if you can, or afford rent, which is just through the roof right now?
I want to give, Kalila, I'm so grateful for this program. And I want to use it to give hope to the Jamaican people. I think I've been around long enough to see several back-to-school periods. And it is during back-to-school that the hardship really comes out, because parents have to make household allocations in favor of education, and other areas will suffer. Poor households sometimes aren't able to make these kinds of allocations. But whilst the struggle continues, whilst definitely there are Jamaican households struggling to send their children back to school, I took the time yesterday and today to just analyze the back-to-school period. And it is clear that it went off seamlessly in most instances. This is not just because the Ministry of Education put things in place and the systems are in place. It is because the economy is recovering. It is because more persons are employed. And even if the income is a little bit lower, and though we have increased the minimum wage, and there is still the impact of inflation, the truth is that more Jamaicans have jobs, and therefore more households have income. The allocative decisions are still difficult. You have to make a choice between sometimes buying a full basket of food or buying books. And I'm hoping that the Jamaican people are making the right choices with their limited incomes to invest in things like education.
What is the right choice in that situation? Books or food? Those seem like two non-negotiables.
Well, I'm not prescribing, and I'm very careful to do that in our democracy, but I can give guidance. I think that if you want to see a permanent change in your circumstances, you ask, what should we be doing? In our perpetual struggle as a people, from the plantation to where we are now, we have to recognize that the struggle is not going to change by us giving up hope or throwing up our hands or making perverse choices. Our conditions and circumstances will change if we acknowledge that, yes, you know, things are difficult. As Bob Marley said, rain or fall, but the dirty tough. If we change our perspective and say the dirty tough, but rain is falling. Things are difficult, but more people are getting employed. Yes, we had a terrible bout of inflation, but it wasn't Jamaica alone. And the government has increased the minimum wage. Government has put $112 billion more into public sector compensation. The government has put in place what we call a social pension. So for those persons who weren't contributing to NIS and who didn't have a pension from previous employment, if they're 75 years and older, they can register for some support. The government has increased the support for the PATH program. So we're cognizant that things are difficult. We will never, ever deny that. The struggle is real. The challenges are real. I see it every day. But things are improving. And so now is not the time for us to take a pessimistic or fatalistic view of the future.
Mm. Well, let's talk about taxes, PM, because that's one thing that is in your control as we talk about inflation and how people deal with it. Is it feasible to lower taxes at this time to make things a little bit more affordable for ordinary people?
You know, Kalila, as you know, as someone who is in the financial system, taxes are distortionary to how a free market would work. But they're an effective tool for gathering revenues, but they're also an effective tool for promoting or dissuading industries or consumption patterns. What we do not want to do with taxes is to play around with them too much. The policy of this government is to keep taxation stable. Once you price in what the tax is, regardless of what your income level is, but once you can price it in and you know that this tax is not going to increase on you, you're in a far better position. So a stable tax system is one that Jamaica has benefited from since this government has been in this running the administration. And I think people take it for granted that the taxes have been stable, but if they were to reflect on the 10 years before when taxes were unstable and how difficult that period was, then I think a greater appreciation would be had for what this government has done in keeping taxes.
So that interview with Prime Minister Andrew Holness was indeed one of our highest viewed episodes. Raquel, I love how Raquel is taking ownership of this. Raquel said we had over 400 live. I love you how you even remember it. And I love that you said we had over 400 live. You know, Raquel is always the one in the comments telling people to like up the videos. Another OG, big up yourself, Raquel. If my memory serves me correctly, we had over 700 live when the Prime Minister was on. So it was a very, very highly anticipated episode, especially because at the time, and still, inflation has been just eating us alive, which was issue number one in the Jamaican economy. We are still dealing with the ravages of inflation to this day. And I think it is one of the reasons that the JLP administration is lagging in the polls. So whenever that election is called, Andrew himself has admitted they're in trouble. And we will see how that plays out when the election is indeed called. It is constitutionally due in 2025. Now, moving on to our final clip of the night. This one was by far our most popular episode. It's also the longest interview with a guest. So Michael Leachin was on for 55 minutes. Normally, we try to keep our guest interviews to about 20-25 minutes, but the interview with MLC was just so good that it kept on going. And we had so many gems being dropped in that interview. You guys asked him to do a mentorship program, which led to money mentorship. What was it? Ask Mike. That led to the Ask Mike series, which led to a bunch of other things, him sharing his principles with us, the draft of his book, and so many other things. So here's a clip from that interview with Michael Leachin. That's what we all want to know. What is the formula? Tell us.
Okay, so what I wanted to do was what I figured out was the common threads between every single wealthy person. People who created wealth, not inherited it, not who were not born into it, not who didn't marry into it, but created it. And I figured that, so I went, as an engineer, there's a process you go through when you're looking at solving any problem. Number one, you observe. Number two, from your observations, you create a hypothesis. Then you stress test your hypothesis. Thirdly, if it holds true, you codify it. And then lastly, you hardwire it. So I observe wealthy people, and I noticed that they all did, I remember people who created the wealth, they all did 5 things. The first thing they did, and by the way, Khalil, let me walk you through it. You think of any wealthy person who created it, anywhere in the world, okay? Don't tell me who. And I'm going to tell you the 5 things that that person you're thinking of did to have created wealth. Number 1, that person, Kalila, created wealth by owning a few, not too many, high-quality businesses. Am I right? Number 2, that person really understands those few businesses. Am I right?
Yes.
Number 3, those businesses are domiciled, located in an industry that has strong long-term growth characteristics.
Absolutely.
Number 4, that person used other people's money to have created the wealth.
Yes, very true.
And lastly, Kalila, that person's attitude towards ownership is, I'll hold these businesses, these few businesses, for as long as they remain high quality and the industries within which they're domiciled remains in a strong long-term growth trend. So those are the 5 things that everybody who created wealth did. So all I now need to do, so that's a framework. And all I now need to do was execute on the framework and stick to it, which is what I did.
So what was your first business?
My first business was, well, firstly, another essential necessity to create wealth is what I now codify as the 3 Ps. The first P is you have to be able to predict where a sector is going, where an industry is going, right? Where a country is going. You have to be able to predict. That's the first P. Then you have to plan for your prediction. And then thirdly, you have to persevere with your plan. So if you do the 3 Ps, you will prosper. Okay? So predict, plan, and persevere. So what did I predict?
Persevere, prosper.
Yes, exactly. What did I predict? I predicted back in 1983 that the money management business, the asset management business, would be in a strong long-term growth mode. So how did I conclude that? With a high degree of confidence, whereby I would go out and borrow a lot of money to put into one stock. I'll explain to you how I predicted. Well, I'm a member of the baby boomer community cohort. So that's bookended by people who were born between 1946 and 1964. And I'm smack bang in the middle. And the baby boomer cohort is the largest cohort in the was the largest cohort in the North American population back in the late 70s, early 80s, about 30% of the North American population. So whatever that cohort does, because they are such a large percentage of the population, whatever they are doing en masse as a group, there goes the economy. So in 1983, I was 32. So I thought, so what do 32-year-old families, what are they doing today? Well, they're buying a home, they're buying a car, refrigerator, they're consuming. So therefore, 30% of the North American population is engaged in consumption. So we're in a consumption boom right now. But you don't make money, you don't create any wealth by doing what people are doing today. You create wealth by doing today what they'll be doing tomorrow. So I thought, okay, I'm 32. We're all consuming. What will 10 years from now, what will 42-year-old might be doing? Or the likes of 42-year-old might. In the median age in the baby boomer cohort, 10 years from now, we're 42. Well, at 42, you're going to say, oh my gosh, I've been consuming for the last couple of decades. Retirement is coming up in 23 years, 65. I don't have enough money saved. So all of a sudden, coming the largest percentage of the North American population will wake up and say, oh my gosh, I don't have enough money saved. I need to save and invest. So there's coming a saving and investing boom. Predict based on demographics. So how do I participate in that? Well, I can buy shares in a bank. When you buy shares in a bank, you can get loan losses. So that's not the bullseye. I could buy shares in an insurance company. When you buy shares in an insurance company, you can suffer from underwriting losses. So that too is not the bullseye. Or I can buy shares in an asset management business. Bullseye. So I went out as a young man, 32, and borrowed $500,000 Canadian dollars, $500,000. It was more than my net worth then, to put into one stock. A stock called Mackenzie Financial Corporation, which is a money management company, because it met the 5 criteria. Right? Number 1, it was a high quality business. Number 2,
you were working there at the time, no?
No. I used to sell their products. And
that's what it was.
I would sell their products.
So you were very familiar with their products.
I was very familiar with their products. I was very familiar with the industry. I knew the margins from the margins pertaining to each product. I understood the regulatory environment. I understood where the industry was going, etc. So I went out and borrowed $500,000 to put into one stock, Mackenzie. I bought at $1 per share in October of 1993. And also, I went and bought Berkshire Hathaway shares, Mr. Warren Buffett shares, back in 1983.
Wow.
Right?
Talk about a win.
The Mackenzie shares went from $1 in 1983, October, to $7 by 1987, in 4 years. So 500,000 became 3.5 million. That gave me my start.
Michael Lee Chin dropping gems. For those of you who never saw that one, go back and watch it. I think the important thing that he mentioned there was predicting. Because yes, the money isn't made based on what people are doing now. And I think you guys may have learned that from Julian Morrison, one of our regular analysts. The money is made by predicting what people are going to be doing tomorrow, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and putting your money in those companies of the future, those companies that are creating the things now that we are going to be using in the next few years. So very, very important lessons there coming from Michael Lee Chin.